NBC News is reporting that acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney first learned about the U.S. military raid against al-Baghdadi after the operation was already underway. Mulvaney was at his home in South Carolina on Saturday when the president tweeted, "Something very big has just happened!" And Mulvaney was then briefed on the raid later that evening. Here is what the White House Chief of Staff is supposed to be doing in those situations. There's White House Chief of Staff Bill Daley standing right there in the Situation Room with President Obama. Politico is reporting that Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman testified on Tuesday that he was excluded from debriefing President Trump on Ukraine because a former aide to Republican Congressman Devin Nunes, who had joined the White House staff, had convinced the president that he was the National Security Council's Ukraine advisor instead of Colonel Vindman. Quote, Vindman testified that he was told this directly by his boss at the time, NSC Senior Director for European and Russian Affairs, Fiona Hill. Hill told Vindman that she and National Security Advisor John Bolton thought it best to exclude Vindman from the debriefing to avoid an uncomfortable situation, he said. Joining our discussion now is Chris Whipple. He literally wrote the book on how a White House is supposed to be run. It is called The Gatekeepers, How the White House Chiefs of Staff Define Every Presidency, except Mick Mulvaney, apparently, Chris, at this point. Trump has had the worst relationships with White House Chiefs of Staff ever. This is a fascinating level, what we saw this weekend, where it's let him go home and not even tell him what's happening.
Yeah, let me just begin by conceding what you've been trying to tell me for a long time, Lawrence, which is that the subtitle of my book, How the White House Chiefs Define Every Presidency, is no longer operative, as Ron Ziegler used to say. Only Donald Trump defines his presidency. And in the process, what we've seen over the last week is that he's defined the chief of staff out of existence. I mean, Mick Mulvaney had no authority to begin with, never tried to assert the authority that he should have. But now he's the invisible man in South Carolina during one of the critical national security operations of the presidency. So we truly have a situation where there are no guardrails, no grown-ups, and the inmate is running the asylum.
To the point that there's someone walking around in the building who Donald Trump thinks is the Ukraine expert and is not the Ukraine expert.
That's an incredible story, the Politico story today. And so here, it's classic Trump. He's essentially got a choice. He can be briefed by the guy with the chest full of medals, Harvard-educated, fluent in Russian and Ukrainian, the expert on Ukraine, or he can be briefed by this guy from Nunez's office wearing a tinfoil hat who pursues these ridiculous conspiracy theories. Guess who he chooses? Naturally, he goes with the tinfoil hat guy. And this speaks to this astonishing obsession of Trump with the 2016 election. And I think, look, we've had delusional presidents before. Richard Nixon was convinced there was something in a safe in the Brookings Institution and told Haldeman to go blow the safe. And it was a figment of his imagination. But it's nothing compared to this fixation of Donald Trump.
And by the way, they just didn't do it.
They just didn't. They didn't do it.
They did break in a Watergate, but they did not break in a Brookings.
That was one that Haldeman decided not to do.
Right.
But it pales in comparison to this obsession that Trump has with 2016. And I agree with Tom Bossert, his erstwhile ally, maybe still ally, who said, this is Trump's white whale. This could be the thing that really brings him down. And if it does, no chief of staff will be around to talk him out of it.
How much time does Mick Mulvaney have with this title, which apparently is all he has, is the title?
Well, again, the title is symptomatic of the fact that there is no functioning White House chief of staff right now. And therefore, I don't think Trump is in any hurry to replace him. He clearly has no interest. He's in a chief of staff. He's unchained, unbound, and we're all seeing the results of letting Trump be Trump.
And the Mulvaney holding on to the OMB job at the same time, wasn't that Mulvaney's way of saying, I know this chief of staff thing cannot possibly work?
I I can't imagine what the motivation was, but it's clearly, it clearly this is just the most dysfunctional White House we've ever seen, more dysfunctional by the day, and it's unclear who's in charge of what. Is Jared Kushner the White House chief of staff? Is Ivanka? Is anybody really performing that function? I don't think so.
Chris Whipple, let's figure out a new subtitle after the show tonight. We'll stick around at the desk. We'll work on it.